Now I want to turn now to the crime that has people across the country asking, how could it happen? Among them, the President of the United States, Barack Obama. A lot of people are asking whether the attack on a special needs scene allegedly by 4 black suspects who shouted slurs against white people and Donald Trump, how that shows that race relations are getting worse. I want you to listen to what President Obama tells Chicago's WBBM.
I don't think it's accurate to say race relations have gotten worse. Listen, I came to Chicago in '85. You were there during council wars. Right. I promise you, race relations haven't gotten worse. But what is true is that, in part because we see visuals of racial tensions, violence, and so forth, because of smartphones and the internet and the media, what we've seen is surfacing, I think, a lot of the problems that have been there a long time, whether it's tensions between police and communities, whether it's hate crimes of the despicable sort that has just now recently surfaced on Facebook. I take these things very seriously.
I want to bring in now CNN's Rosa Flores live for us in Chicago. Rosa has been covering the story. The 4 suspects, Rosa, have been charged in this heinous attack that was streamed live on Facebook. Tell us about the charges.
You know, they're charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and of course with a hate crime, Dawn. And now the police tell me that it took them a while to talk to prosecutors and come up with a plan to make sure that they have the evidence to present in court to actually convict on the hate crime, and they do believe that they do have that evidence, Don.
Mm-hmm. You interviewed a woman today, Rosa, who saw the suspects before the victim was found. Tell me about that.
You know, she says that there was a van that was driving erratically on Monday, and it caught their attention because then a woman wearing a blonde wig was hiding her face and walking around that van, and it just stood out to her and to her community. And then, lo and behold, a day later, there was a swarm of police officers with shining lights at this van. And then she saw that horrendous video that we've all seen that was live streamed on Facebook, and here's what she said.
It's scary. It's really scary, and I'm constantly telling my sister that we need to find somewhere else to live.
Now, she didn't see the victim walking in this neighborhood, Dawn, but from talking to the police, they say that it was 20 degrees outside, about 20 degrees, and he was wearing a tank top, shorts, and flip-flops. So imagine, being found by police. He was disoriented, he was injured. Police officers saw him and took him to the hospital.
Unbelievable. As we said last night, we're thinking about him and we wish him well. Rosa, what can you tell us about these 4 suspects and their relationship with this victim?
Well, one of the suspects, Jordan Hill, is actually a friend of the victim, and he picked him up at a restaurant in a northwest suburb of Chicago, actually in that van that I was telling you about that this woman noticed on the west side of Chicago. And the van was stolen, police say, and he drove the victim to Chicago, about 30 miles. You know this area very well, Don. And then the police say that this was not a premeditated event. They say that this was a weekend hangout that, of course, went really, really wrong.
Rosa Flores in Chicago. Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate that. I want to bring in now Demetri Roberts, a former Chicago police officer, activist Jamal Green, Dominique Jordan Turner, president and CEO of Chicago Scholars, and radio host AC Green. I'm so glad all of you can come on to talk about this just horrific act that happened. We discussed it at length last night. Everyone agrees that this was a heinous act, Demetri, and the video is just shocking. What's your reaction?
Well, it's simple, and what I call on our viewers to think about as we look at these issues nationally and as we really work hard to address them here in Chicago is we really have to fight hard not to be divided behind these issues. Listen, hate is hate. Bad things are bad things. Wrong is wrong. So I think, and what we've seen trend is that folks want to be divided behind this, and I urge them not to. And if we do want to be if we do want to focus on something, let's focus on the truth. Yeah. Let's focus on justice here, because that's that's what we really can stand behind and come up with some sensible solutions.
I think you're exactly right.
The truth is,
if you look
there's
at
a crime that happened.
Yeah, and if you look at social media especially, you'll see that people are looking for ways to be divided about this. There's no making excuses for this. And people want to parse words and all that. There's no excuse for this. This is an awful event, as the president said today. The video, though, is very difficult to watch. Look at this just for a moment, and then you'll see.
No, cause I got my blood on this shit, bro. Hey, cut this off, boy. I'm gonna make your ass walk on, boy.
AC, again, it's hard to watch, and I've watched the full thing unedited, and I just can't believe what I'm watching, that it's actually real. And I wonder where they learn such reprehensible behavior. But do you believe the charges are appropriate here?
Listen, Don, thanks for having me on. Millions of listeners I have across Chicago, and 70% of those listeners are African American. My listeners think that it's absolutely horrendous what took place. But at the same time, Don, you have to hate crime. At this point, not so sure. You have a case in Idaho where 3 teens sodomized a handicapped black child with a hanger and then forcibly pushed the hanger into the child's rectum, and they let those teens go. So is it horrendous? Yes. Should it be a hate crime? So a jump to a rush to judgment? In Chicago, we have a whole lot of things going on with regards
to
policing.
But AC, police have said, if you listen to Rosa's report, police have said that they now have evidence that they believe it's a hate crime. And as I said, as I said last night, when you hear them say, talking about F white people, F Donald Trump, all of the suspects are black, and the victim is white, how can you not say it's a hate crime?
No. I'm saying clearly it is hate. It's rooted in hate. But what we have to understand is the reason that you have these situations like this where the mentality has gone so bad and you have so many situations like this is because we're not equally parsing it out. So these kids are looking at social media, they're watching these other cases around the country, and they're wondering why them. Hate does not just start because you grew up, you were born in hate. Hate started when you started to seed it inside of people, through them watching and them hearing and them being formed around ideas that are unjust.
Okay, stand by, and I'll get the rest of the panel in. Unfortunately, I have to take a break. We'll continue to talk about this on the other side. We're back now talking about the 4 suspects now charged with battery, kidnapping, and hate crime in the chilling torture of a teenager, streamed on Facebook Live. President Obama calling the attack despicable. Back with me now, Dimitri Roberts, Jamal Green, Dominique Jordan Turner, and AC Green. Okay, so Dominique, I've got to ask you this. InfoWars has blamed this on Black Lives Matter, starting the hashtag BLM kidnapping. Within 24 hours, the hashtag BLM kidnapping was mentioned more than 480,000 times on Twitter. Authorities have said they have found no link to the Black Lives Matter group. What's your reaction to this?
So my reaction is very similar to yours, Don. It was really hard for me to watch that. More importantly, I was saddened to see the narrative that keeps coming around Chicago. It is not reflective of the Chicago that I know and love and work in every day, nor the young people that I work to support every day in this city. And so as Dimitri mentioned around sensible solutions, the solution really is around education. All roads are going to lead back to education. It doesn't have anything to do with the Black Lives Matter movement. This is an aspect of education, exposure, and mentorship. That is what we need for the city of Chicago. And otherwise, this will continue to happen, but it is not affiliated at all with this national network of organizations called Black Lives Matter.
And Jamal, it's very sickening that some fake news organizations continue to push this false or fake narrative about this. What's your reaction?
You know what? I think they just want to taint the movement. And the real thing is there are activists like myself who are trying to bring people together. They use platforms, cases like this, using it as a platform to try to divide us. At the end of the day, what these kids did in this case were wrong. But the purpose of Black Lives Matter is to say that black people want to be treated equally. So when we talk about justice, let's also talk about that case that AC Green was talking about. When they used that coat hanger and penetrated that mentally disabled black man. What happened? They got what? They got nothing. They walked out of the jail. At the end of the day, these kids that did this crime, they're going to go to jail and rot under it. So at the end of the day, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we want black people to be treated equally. This justice system has to have a level playing field, and we got a long way to go.
And they should, if convicted, they should go to jail, considering
They should.
how horrific that video is and the acts that are taped, that are seen on camera in there. So listen, I want to ask you, Dimitri, there are hate crimes committed by people on both sides of the political spectrum. Why do these attacks, you think, become so political?
Well, it's simple. It helps to fuel somebody else's rhetoric and their narrative. It's an opportunity. And opportunists right now are taking advantage of a young man that's been injured and really moving past the humanity behind it. Why are we talking about black or white anything when there's another human being that has been tortured and that is really having a tough time right now? And then we want to politicize this? They're selfish. That's why they're politicizing it. And they have their own agendas. And those agendas aren't to help, they aren't to heal, and they aren't to come up with sensible solutions. We all agree here, Don, folks on this panel, folks in this community, and folks in this country, that this is wrong. And if we want to unify behind something, let's unify behind the truth. Let's talk about justice here. And let's come up with a sensible solution and focus on why this happened and address the root of that problem. And then we'll see our country turn around and we'll see these communities much better.
Does anyone in this panel not think this is a hate crime?
This is a hate crime.
Yeah, I just want to.
This is a hate crime.
I think
parody is what we do.
And further, hate doesn't have a color.
Right, exactly.
Nor does ignorance.
Exactly.
Does anyone on this
hate.
panel
Exactly.
believe that what happened, just to be specific, because again, there are a lot of fake news organizations out there who are presenting fake information. Does anyone believe that this is not a heinous, despicable act? Is anyone making excuses for these kids?
This
Or
is
for
a
these
heinous,
young people?
despicable
No
act.
excuses. Don, we can't make excuses for what these kids did, but we have to look at the root of the problem. We got to look at the parental guidance. Whose house was that? Where are their parents? At the end of the day, we have mayors and aldermen and people who are not doing their jobs. These neighborhoods look like third world countries. They're ghost towns. No economic development. No, the schools are underfunded. Boarded up houses. No plan to redevelop when they knock them down. What are we going to do to start giving these kids alternatives? The unemployment rate is the highest in Chicago than it is around the country. Let's start talking about the root problem. That's why violence is high, and that's why situations like this is happening.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I get asked all the time, Don, what's the solution here? We're the solution. We're the thoughtful people that are going out into these communities every day, just like Dominique said, and we're doing the tough work. Here's what we need. We need the resources. We need the help.
Absolutely.
We need the advocacy. And we need folks to stand behind us as we lead this fight to make Chicago better.
And what do you say to the victims and the victim and his family?
I'm sorry.
Right now-
For 'em.
I'm sorry.
We're praying for them. There are ministers across Chicago that have come together. They're going to be taking up donations and to help with that family. Listen, you know African Americans are peace-loving people. You know, down in South Carolina, we saw families being murdered in a church, and then yet they gave forgiveness to the man who murdered them. So we're peace-loving people, but we have to see parity in these situations. These kids need infrastructure, they need parenting, they need, it's a hot issue,
Listen,
but we
need
cannot,
education.
Listen, Don.
I gotta run. I've
It's
gotta
no,
run.
no, peace doesn't have a color either. Let's come up with a peace and sensible solution that we can all stand behind. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
panel. More news
But
coming
let's
up.
come-
We'll be right back.